And we continue at 1:05 in the afternoon on the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wings in Culver City.
John, the 12 o'clock hour of this show has been posted wherever you get your podcasts of the John Phillips Show. Fast forward to about the 14-minute mark to hear John completely die after hearing Katie Porter's Paul.
All right, let's carve some pumpkins.
Careful, I have a knife.
Paul!
Is that the real Katie Porter?
I knew we would replay that at some point.
It was a day worth waiting for.
All right. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is a founding member of the Recall Gavin Newsom campaign of 2020. You can get him online at rebuildcalifornia.com and follow him on X at Netter Mike. Mike Netter, welcome.
Pleasure to be here today. I got to admit I'm exhausted after Thanksgiving. These free-range turkeys are really hard to catch, but I got the slowest of the herd and managed to have a good bird day. I hope everybody did too.
All right, and a slice of pumpkin pie, too. Okay, let's get into the weeds here on what's going on right now in Sacramento, because it seems like every time you click refresh on your computer, there is a new scandal in California. We know that the Attorney General of California, Rob Bonta, recently had a law firm, or paid a law firm, $500,000 from his campaign account, from his reelection account. He originally said that that money was going to help the federal government investigate criminal wrongdoing in California. He then went back and amended that statement and said, well, it was actually for representation for me because I was a witness and potentially a victim in a case that they're looking into, and I just needed to have representation when I testified or when I spoke with the federal government. $500,000 is not an insignificant amount of money, particularly when you're paying for it from your reelection campaign. So that's what's going on with him. Then you have the chief of staff for Governor Gavin Newsom, Dana Williamson, who has been indicted by the federal government. They say that she has been corrupt for years, including during her time as the chief of staff for Gavin Newsom, when they allege she was selling the state's position on various lawsuits, and she was doing things she shouldn't have been doing to help clients. Then you have money that was in a campaign account, a dormant campaign account, belonging to then Secretary of Health and Human Services, Xavier Becerra, and apparently money to the tune of $10,000 a month was leaving that campaign account and paying for very lavish lifestyles, not just for Dana Williamson, but for other top Democratic strategists in Sacramento, including one who is the former chief of staff to Xavier Becerra. It seems like everywhere you turn, it's nothing but scandal.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because I put it as when corruption turns to desperation. First off, you've got to assume that these political aficionados, the people that have been around in this space for most of their lives, allegedly are corrupt, but certainly know the system, and certainly know that if you take money out of a public fund that everybody can see, like Dana Williamson, someone's going to spot it at some point since it's public record. You would think that good old Rob Bonta would realize that spending close to $500,000 to defend himself against allegedly we're not sure what would become public knowledge. So you've got to first off take a step back and say, of all the assets, shall we say, that these folks have access to, what drove them to literally take money out of things that are part of public record? And so somewhere along the line, The corruption led to desperation, either supporting, in Dana's case, a $150,000 trip to Mexico. And John, you've been to Mexico, and I've been to Mexico, and I'm really trying to imagine what you do down there for $150,000, but let's put that for another segment. But why were they so desperate to do these things? Now, what struck me as interesting in some of my research this morning, when you actually led with a pretty good portion in the segment, one of the things Williamson is accused of in moving around her political strength, if you will, is a case about a year or so ago, or whatever it was, with a company called Activision, if I have the name correctly, which was a gaming company. That gaming company was actually one of her PR clients, and she pressured the state of California to drop the case. And they settled for something like $50 million or whatever it was, but apparently a lot less than they would have settled for if the state moved forward with the case. What I found really interesting is that one of Activision's main legal firms, and I want to get this right here, and Randy, you can correct me as my human spell check, if you will, is the firm of Wilson, Sonsini, Goodrich, and Rosaria, who has been working with Activision for years. They also happen to be, ready for a drum roll, gentlemen, the same firm that Rob Bonta paid $500,000 to for what we're not sure of. What are the odds that these things are interrelated, but all these people do run in the same circles, but something, what lies beneath the ocean, as we say, is moving to the surface where Williamson, Bonta feel obligated to use publicly trackable accounts. These aren't in the Caymans. These aren't Swiss bank accounts. These are things that are reported on every 30 to 90 days, almost overnight during the campaign period like we just went through. So what drove them to literally do something where they had to have pretty good knowledge the public and reporters were going to be aware of it?
Okay, let's go back to Sheng Tao, the former mayor of Oakland, for a second, who has been indicted. She's being charged with federal crimes related to corruption. One of the things that she consistently said through the entire process is that the federal government told her that she was not the target of the investigation. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't necessarily be charged with a crime if they come across criminal wrongdoing when they're investigating someone else. But she has never changed her tune on that. She's been very consistent from the moment she started talking about it, that they told her she was not the target of the investigation. Rob Bonta, in a sit-down interview with Ashley Zavala, said that the federal government told him he is not the target of the investigation. Dana Williamson claimed that when the FBI came knocking on her door, they told her she was not the target of the investigation, that Gavin Newsom was. She's the only one who has said that they have told her point blank that Gavin Newsom was the intended target of the investigation, but that's the only name that we've been given so far. What do you make of that?
Well, first off, let's be clear here. We have people that are indicted for various crimes, not under oath, telling things to the press. Should we believe them to begin with? Okay. And I don't work for the FBI, or fortunately have never been the target of a federal investigation. But I'm going to assume a lot of time when they come to your door, they may not be entirely forthcoming. Obviously, they were wiretapping Dana Williamson. And when you talk about Gavin Newsom and Rob Bonta, these are two of the top officials in California. And these are people, Rob, that are hovering in their orbit, that are in the room with these people. And I've got to tell you, as a political advocate, as just basically a dumb dude on the street, I find it really hard to believe that people that close to the orbit of the mayor of Oakland that have contributed that I can't pronounce his name, but the gentleman who ran the recycling plant,
The
and
Dong
maybe
family.
the Dong family, which facetiously, if you've got a Vietnamese guy, waste management, you hear prostitution, at some point you would think Rob Bonta would have said, hey, maybe I shouldn't be involved in this or take their donations to begin with. You've got to think that they're surrounded by smart enough people who heard some stuff in the room and that they had some kind of knowledge of what's going on. The fork in the road, John, in my opinion, is if you didn't have some knowledge of it, you're really that stupid. If you did have some knowledge of it, you're really that corrupt. And now we're arguing again the degrees between inept and evil. Obviously, as the chapters of this story pile up, like with the law firm, there's a lot to see here, and certainly, in my opinion, a lot which doesn't seem right.
Right before the show began today, the reporter CeCe Woods, who was on the program yesterday, who's an investigative reporter for The Current, reported the following, quote, while running the California Department of Justice, Rob Bonta's chief of staff, Viviana Becerra, quietly collected a $50,000 campaign check from his political committee, all documented, all real, all filed under penalty of perjury. Not a consultant, not a volunteer. She was the Attorney General's top aide when the money landed. Legal loophole? Maybe. Ethical disaster? Absolutely. Sacramento loves to pretend this is normal. It isn't. When the AG's chief of staff is being paid by his campaign while managing Department of Justice operations, the conflict of interest isn't subtle. It's screaming, and we've got the receipts. The truth lives in the numbers, and those numbers don't lie. This, according to reporting from CeCe Woods. Your thoughts on that story?
Well, I saw that by CeCe today, who is an excellent investigative reporter. And I think it goes back to, again, I started in this political game about 5 years ago. And when I started talking to reporters, I had mentioned to a lot of people, you always talk about money raised. Rob Bonta has raised or has in the bank $7 million. This candidate has raised X amount of million. I said, you really need to take a look at the expenditures column. And I think what's finally coming to light, thank goodness, let's say 3, 4, 5 years later after I started in this, is reporters and maybe even investigators are starting to look at the expenditures. Because it seems, even when I grew up, and again, I ain't no spring chicken, as they say, they always talked about how much money candidates raised. And only the last couple of years have I heard, well, what are they spending the money on? I mean, where does this money go? These are huge bank accounts sitting out there. But I think it's absolutely valid point that CeCe has, that we're finally looking at where are these huge pots of money that they're being spent on. Again, it might be legal, but what are these people being paid for? Rob Bonta, last I checked, right now really isn't running for office, and let's assume he's running for Attorney General. There is literally one person only running for Attorney General. That's Rob Bonta. So I'm not quite sure. I mean, there's not even another Democrat or Republican running. So why does his campaign have to remain so active? And when you even look at some of his donations from unions and other influence peddlers this morning, you've got to wonder how this circle of, I'm going to call it, corruption really works. Where again, why are these people getting paid these big amounts of money? What exactly are they doing every day?
Gavin Newsom so far hasn't commented on many of these scandals. He did comment on the Dana Williamson scandal and essentially alluded to the fact that this could be a political prosecution from the Trump administration. He said that he was shocked by these allegations against his former chief of staff, didn't throw her under the bus, didn't give her a full throttle defense, largely stayed agnostic. As far as I know, he hasn't made a comment on Rob Bonta spending the $500,000 of his campaign account, from his campaign account, on attorneys to represent him while he spoke to the FBI. What do you think Gavin Newsom is thinking about all of this behind the scenes as he sees people who work for him or used to work for him, people who he has appointed to high office right now knee deep in scandal?
I think Gavin's just hoping it fades out of the news cycle. It's interesting when you look this morning at the Dana Williamson stories, and I want to say I really appreciate the opportunity to do this segment and keep it in the public purview, because there hasn't been a major news story about this since about 11/22, 11/25, right, which is in the news cycle is starting to move a long ways away. I think Gavin is just hoping that it just kind of goes away and fades out of view. He can scream about Trump and scream about other things. But I would also like to say, as per a post I put out on @NetterMike, my plugin on my X account, he didn't even go. Stockton 211 put out yesterday, he didn't even bother to show up at Stockton where there was a major shooting over the weekend. Instead, he's off to the East Coast to scream against Donald Trump. Gavin Newsom spent no time governing California. He certainly is hoping that anything that damages his persona or ego just goes away. And I think that's kind of Rob Bonta's kind of trying to defend himself with Ashley Zabata, God bless her, a little bit. But I think Gavin Newsom has probably been told the less you say, the better, because the more you say, the more questions which come out. And look, if a guy like me can find this morning attorney firms in common with connections to Williamson's clients, and Rob Bonta, certainly people way more intelligent than me, which is most people out there, can find even more connections. And every time Gavin Newsom, with his bully pulpit, opens his mouth, it's going to trigger more precipitating moments for people try to look things up and find other connections. Again, I think there's a fairly big trail here of these connections.
Mike Netter, founding member of the Recall Gavin Newsom campaign back in 2020. You can get him online at rebuildcalifornia.com and follow him on X at NetterMike. Mike Netter, thanks so much for stopping by.
A pleasure.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number. Let's go to Sean in Venice. Sean, hello.
No, Sean went away.
Oh.
I can give you Ruth or Bobby.
All right, let's go with Ruth.
Yes, I enjoy your show so much, but I have a question. When are they going to make PG&E start paying for all the damages they've caused? It's gone clear back to the Aaron Brockovich story.
Well, that's a good question, because PG&E is the luckiest company in the state of California. It seems like they are the company with 9 lives. And it doesn't matter if they start fires. It doesn't matter if they are held criminally responsible. They have a friend in Sacramento by the name of Gavin Newsom. And when they need a bailout, the state of California is right there to pony up and get out the checkbook and give PG&E exactly what they need to continue to be operational. And it's a company where the city of San Francisco has been trying to separate itself from PG&E for how long, Randy?
100 years.
So that tells you everything you need to know about how happy the customers are. But it's a company that just manages to be the luckiest company on planet Earth. And unfortunately, I don't see that changing anytime soon. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number. 1-800-222-5222. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, if you want to send the 12 o'clock hour to some of your friends and family who well, let's just say they're interested in Katie Porter and her campaign for governor, that's easy to do.
All you got to do is search for The John Phillips Show wherever you get your podcasts. And that could be the Apple Podcasts app. It could be iHeart. It could be Spotify. Search for The John Phillips Show. Hit subscribe. You can download all the episodes. You could do a Google on the YouTube. You can get your free KABC app, your free KSFO app. Get the KMJ Now app. We're on that station Saturdays at 2. You can listen live to all the radio stations and download all the podcasts. And I just have to say, for as much as we laugh on this show, this is the hardest Johnny has laughed in maybe a year.
All right, let's carve some pumpkins. Careful, I have the knives.
Oh!
Is that the real Katie Porter? You laugh so hard you sound like you're dying.
I sound like I have stage 4 lung cancer. Never smoked a cigarette in my life. A lot of people in the audience were worried after Katie Porter lost the U.S. Senate race last time around that she was going to go away, and that made them depressed.
No!
She back.
And like manna from heaven, Katie has returned.
I call it the shift gift.
All right, it's time to open up the California Crime Blotter.
It's happened yet again.
It's Wild Wild West out here.
It's the California Crime Blotter with John
And Randy.
And this one involves the post office, although I'm very happy to report it involves crime at the post office that doesn't involve a mass shooting.
You ever notice that when you walk into the post office, there's a sign right at the front door that says, "Warning, armed robbery of a post office can lead to a minimum 25 years in federal prison"?
Yes, because they want to remind everyone that the dingbat local DAs aren't in charge of prosecuting crime at the post office.
Well, one of the things that people inexplicably still do in 2025, almost 2026, is write checks. And it turns out checks can get stolen and washed, and then they can write all the money they want to themselves out of your bank account.
I know this is going to surprise you, but I still write checks.
I'm not surprised one bit. For more, here is CBS LA.
Checks, they aren't as popular as they used to be, but more than 11 billion are written.
The last time I ran out of checks, which is probably more than a decade ago, I literally had no idea how to get more of them.
I have the Anaheim Angels logo on mine.
Not surprised again.
But more than 11 billion are written each year in the U.S., and where there is money, there are thieves. One local man learned this the hard way. Christine Lazar has the new ways criminals are stealing checks and advice on how to protect your money.
I wrote exactly $10,000 with a line.
After writing a 5-figure check.
That totally works when you write the line all the way to the end so no one can add any zeros to that check.
This guy has it all figured out.
I wrote exactly $10,000 with a line.
After writing a 5-figure check to the IRS, Todd, who asked us not to use his last name for privacy reasons.
Everyone's in the witness protection program.
Without fail.
Checked online to make sure it was cashed and didn't think about the money again.
And it wasn't until months later when we did our actual tax return for 2024 where they sent us a letter saying we never received that estimated payment.
When Todd looked at his online bank.
I'm just going to point this out. There is a small fee, but there are services where you can pay the IRS with a credit card, and then that $10,000 turns into points.
And you can fly to Europe.
When Todd looked at his online bank account, he saw that this particular check didn't have the usual footprint.
So normally you see the date, the check number, and the image icon. In this check, and only this check, in the whole history that we could go back online, there was no check number, 8004, and no image.
The bank had a hard time locating an image of the check, but once it did.
I think there's people that work at the bank that don't even know what checks are.
Anyone under 40?
Yep.
The bank had a hard time locating an image of the check, but once it did, Todd knew he had been robbed.
So what we saw was our check where they washed out or changed the recipient. So instead of United States Treasury, it was an individual's name.
A woman's
Cash.
Not the guy in charge of the FBI.
Cash with a C.
A woman's name that was unfamiliar to Todd. The dollar amount stayed the same, but had been rewritten, and the memo line was altered as well.
In the 27 years that you've been with Wells Fargo, have they contacted you in the past to verify a check?
They have.
But not in this case.
Not in this case.
Todd filed a fraud claim, but because more than 30 days had passed since the check was cashed, Wells Fargo would not reimburse him. Telling CBS News California Investigates, "We never want to see anyone experience a financial scam or fraud. We continue to raise awareness to help our customers avoid, detect, and quickly report incidents." Todd was shocked that the bank wouldn't cover the loss and that he could become a victim of check fraud. He actually had gone.
And again, when you pay for things with a credit card, the credit card has your back.
Well, credit cards can be stolen too. How often do we hear about scams where computer systems are compromised and credit card numbers are in the hands of the wrong people?
That does happen, but unlike a debit card where that money goes away forever, usually you can negotiate things out with your credit card company, and when you're the victim of fraud, they're like, okay, well, we're not going to charge you for that. Usually. Okay, I just really like getting points. Makes me happy.
Todd was shocked that the bank wouldn't cover the loss and that he could become a victim of check fraud. He actually had gone out of his way to hand deliver the check inside the post office.
But we really had no idea that something that you put in the mail in the post office wouldn't be handled with care.
According to the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, check fraud costs Americans over $1 billion.
Wait a minute. So the check wasn't stolen out of his mailbox in front of his house. It was stolen at some point in transit in possession of the post office.
That is correct. Think about things that get lost in the mail. This is not a knock on any of the letter carriers. We love you, especially the ones that listen to this show. Things get lost in the mail, and a $10,000 check sure seems important.
Well, did the mail truck get robbed?
That happens. Hell, in Oakland, the mail trucks get tagged, and then when they drive into the wrong neighborhood, they get shot at.
Yeah, the opposing gang doesn't like that.
According to the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, check fraud costs Americans over $1 billion each year. Experts say there are two ways they are.
You can also wire the IRS money directly for free. I know. I recently had to do that.
Well, I just write a check and put it in the mail, but now I'm having second thoughts about that.
Experts say there are two ways they are altering checks.
Is this one of these stories where, while this is a good public service announcement, it is also an education course for aspiring criminals?
I don't think they're watching the news.
I think they are. I think you get so much valuable information as to what kind of crime trends there are and which ones people actually get caught. And that's why you see, for instance, so many different burglaries going on in Encino and nobody getting arrested. So many Kias getting stolen and nobody getting arrested. I think if you're an aspiring young criminal, your best source of information is the local news.
Well, if you're taking a test at your local high school, the best way to get all the information you need is to read the book, but nobody does that.
Experts say there are two ways they are altering checks. Check washing.
Usually they will do it by soaking the check in antifreeze or nail polish remover liquids.
And now,
again, don't try this at home, kids. I know people get iffy about digital payment and wire transfers, but there's a record of this. Even if you wrote that check in blue or black ink, they can wash away the ink.
At some point, we're all going to be forced to use the computer to pay all of our bills.
And now, check cooking.
So cooking the check is essentially taking the information from the check, scanning the check to your computer, scanning the signature, and then putting together a replica.
So then the question.
Yeah, see what you can do is you can buy on eBay or Amazon like an authentic bank check printer. So you can make your own checks at home, kids.
You know, if you're going to go to all of this trouble and jump through all of these hoops, you're better off just making an honest living.
So then the question is, with both check washing and check cooking, does the check look good enough for the banks to be fooled?
Unfortunately, the criminals have all the right hardware, all the right printers, all the right inks.
And bank experts say financial institutions simply cannot reimburse every check fraud victim.
Especially for your larger financial institutions, they are vulnerable and susceptible to, let's say, hundreds of millions of dollars of potential check loss. So there would be no way for any financial institution to absorb.
Really, the banks are broke? That's the answer?
I own stock in Wells Fargo, and they're doing just fine.
Absorb every single type of fraud loss. Essentially, the financial institution would not be able to survive if that was the situation.
Cal Poly Pomona professor Victor Cardona has more than 2 decades in the banking industry. He shared with us tips to protect your money. First and foremost, follow the check. Once it's cashed, check the photo, and if you don't see one online, ask the bank to check. Notify the
You have to check the check?
Notify the bank as soon as you suspect fraud. Contact law enforcement and the Postal Service if you mailed the check.
This seems a lot more steps and a lot more complicated than paying online.
You're just thinking about the point still.
Of course. Do you know how many points you can accumulate when you pay those massive IRS bills? I haven't done it, but there are services where you have to pay a small fee, but you can kind of wire your mortgage or rent payment through a specific kind of credit card and get points on your rent.
Boy, you figured this whole thing out.
I might have a problem. I don't know if what I'm doing is healthy.
Finally, contact the credit bureaus if you are a victim so you don't have your identity stolen as well.
Would you tell people do not write a check under any circumstances?
I would say unless you're writing a check to your nephew or to your, gardener, that you're handing the check to them personally, I think going electronic is the way to go.
See, that guy's in my camp.
Yes, he is. Apparently, he doesn't like sitting in coach either.
And experts say electronic payments are more secure, although they are still vulnerable to theft as well. The best advice, follow your money. Once you write the check or send the wire, keep an eye on it until you know it landed in the right account.
So there you go. If you're writing a big check, just remember there is technology and equipment out there that can take all the ink away or replicate that check and write themselves all the money they want out of your bank account.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number. 1-800-222-5222. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
Will writes in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. I would think that a bank that receives a check with the Anaheim Angels logo on it will bounce even without attempting to deposit, no matter what the amount.
Well, I wish that the checks being sent to Anthony Rendon bounced. All right, let's go to the phones and welcome Albert in Lake County. Albert, hello.
Hi, John. I'm listening to you guys talk, and the easiest part about ripping off checks from the IRS is here in California. When I mail my tax payments, it's different from from who you mail your taxes to. So, in other words, I have the envelope. There's a check in it because it's going to, when you owe taxes, that's the address you're putting down. So I was thinking about that. It's like, man, that's pretty easy to rip off if I'm working for the post office.
Or you're someone who wants to steal from the post office, which I would imagine happens all the time.
Yeah, so I was just thinking that when you guys were talking, I go, man, that's an easy one to distinguish. It's like, oh, here's a check to the IRS, and let's check that one, right?
Excellent point. Thank you for the call, sir. Let's go to Gene in Glendale. Gene, hello.
Mr. John Phillips, Mr. Randy Wang, a couple of good news about the California crime battle. But first of all, I'm glad last Monday, like your PSA says, Mr. Phillips, I'm glad I made you laugh about the your colleague in Vegas, George Knapp, you guys make us laugh all the time, so I'm glad I put the exclamation point on your show. A couple of good things about the California Club. I'm not going to mention the stations unless you want me to, but where it was either one of the other, like you say, shops in town or your station that you used to work at a couple of days ago when this whole thing broke about the little kids in OC with the bikes and all that. Actually, it was true. First, after a few days, they said one of the parents turns one of the kids in, then another parent turned another kid in. So actually, that's good news. The second of all, so we don't have to go with corporal punishment like you suggested yesterday. The second thing is last night on one of the other stations that Mr. Randy Wang used to work at, around 8:30 on the news, your colleague Mark, I forgot his name, he said that they actually caught the knucklehead downtown that accosted the lady at 5 in the morning. Mark Ronner, I think, said that. So that's good news. And the last thing, I got to agree with Mr. Randy Wang. Decades ago, with regards to the criminals watching the news, decades ago, before they made the Metro section into the Cali section of LA Times, they interviewed a gang member, and he said they actually check out the Metro section because it's the rap sheet. It's kind of a much smaller version of how we got in the city in New York, the Daily News and the Post, as opposed to the Times where they do all the criminals and all that, the section, robberies and all that. That's all I got. Till next time. God bless. Be safe, guys.
All right. Thank you for the call, and thank you for the updates on all the crime blotter stories.
Well, I guess the overnight guy at KFI doing news didn't get laid off. That's good.
Let's go to Hector in Long Beach. Hector, hello.
Hi. I just wanted to make a comment. A couple of years back, I went to a business to pay a bill, $185 and change, and I wrote them a check. And the 22-year-old behind the counter says, we don't accept checks anymore. I made her get her manager, who was 24 to 25 years old, and he came over, and he says, well, our check cashing machine isn't broke right now, because he used two different machines and neither one worked. So I told him, well, how about if I pay cash? He says, okay. So I gave him $188 in cash, and he says, well, we owe you 26 cents. I said, okay. He says, well, I can't give you 26 cents because we can't make change like that. How about if we take it off your next month's bill? And I said, well, give me a second. I went out to my car in my ashtray. I pulled all my change out, went back in. Okay, it was 26 cents. He said, okay, and it was all good. I thought that was the funniest thing in the world.
Not equipped to do it the old school way. Thank you for the call, sir. Let's go to John in Santa Monica. John, hello.
Hey, guys. Okay, so your movie for that segment is Catch Me If You Can with Tom Hanks and Leonardo. And I think the term is called a paper hanger. Did you guys see that movie?
I saw that movie a very long time ago, and I don't remember the reference that you're making, but it was about a con man, correct?
Right. This guy, he was printing and using checks from United Airlines or Continental, so he had his own printing press. Then he bought a uniform and was taking free rides on the planes. And the guy, and Tom Hanks was the FBI agent trying to track this guy down, and finally got him in France somewhere and busted him. And then he did his time. And then the FBI hired him from prison to help them track down check kiters and check paper hanger guys because he was so good at looking at it, they call it bad paper. And he ended up getting a career out of it with the FBI. But it was called Catch Me If You Can. It's a good movie. Hanks was always good, and DiCaprio played the job. And he was a young kid. And he remembered seeing the airline pilots going into a hotel, and they're all in their uniforms, and they would just go up to the counter, and they got their rooms. And, everybody assumed that this was a pilot.
All right. We're going to have to leave it there, sir. Thank you for the call. Who knew, Randy? Criminals read the newspaper and they watch Netflix.
I feel like I just heard that whole movie plot. I love it.
We have one more hour coming up right here on The John Phillips Show.